Hello, everybody. So, welcome back to another reading of the tarot cards. In this video, I'm going to be reading three tarot cards in reference to the past, and then three tarot cards in reference to the future. Now, I'm going to be focusing on the weeks. So, if you're watching this on a weekend, like a Sunday, this is going to be a reading for last week. Any events that happened last week, I'm going to be explaining why they happened, what happened, and at the end of the video, I'm going to be reading for the future week, right? So this upcoming week, what's happening, why it's going to happen, right? And what it means. So in between these two readings, I'm going to be also defining some terms which I think are important in philosophy and in psychology. So stick around for that. I'm going to be talking about what I have learned from these topics and then what I think about each one of these topics, right? I almost dropped the cards. Okay, so we're gonna do this dynamic where you choose a number, either 1, 2, or 3, right? So think about the number right now. 1, 2, or 3. What number do you want? And I'm going to be pulling out the first card, all right? So let's see here. The first card is success in business, and we have 3 cups. Now, 3 is the number of creation. So what this card basically means is that in this past week, you did something creative in relation to an emotional situation that had to do with business. So this means that you were successful in an endeavor. Now it could have been a business project, but since it's the cups, we are talking about something emotional. It has a level 3 intensity, which isn't that intense, but it did have a lot to do. And we see here, there's a little image of a person holding their stomach. So this project that you did, it may have taken a toll on you. So it means that emotionally this weekend you feel a little drained, but also satisfied, and especially satisfied emotionally because now you're in a good place because you were successful in the business area. Now, 3 is creation. So this means that there was a high level of creativity, especially emotional, and the situation happened because you wanted to feel that sensation. We could even attribute it to like adrenaline. So it may have made you feel good, right? Like you got that shot of adrenaline, which made you feel good. So it is a good card emotionally. It is something that was in your control also because it's a minor arcana. So, like I explained, the major arcanas were the ones that had to do with situations that were out of your control. This one has to do with a situation that was in your control. And you were successful in the business area. Okay, if you chose 2, here we go. This is protection. Okay, and this is the first one that we get as a major arcana. So a major arcana means that this was not in your control. If you chose number 2, it means that there is some type of protection, and it is the reverse side. It's reverse. So the upside would be support. So kind of taking off from that idea, it's number 7. So number 7, protection. It means that you needed to protect yourself spiritually from something. So it could have been like someone trying to throw a hex on you or trying to cause you harm, right? Like people that can cause you harm because they're jealous or they have envy. And with the eyes, they will say something, right? Look at you. And then, so in this case, you needed that protection. But it's very interesting because this protection came to you from the universe, right? Or from God or from the creator. So it was something that you needed, you received it, and it protected you in some type of situation that was maybe harmful, because it is backwards. So that does mean that it was negative. It was a negative situation, but in this case, you were able to be protected and not harmed. Seven is the number that deals with spirituality, with wisdom, right? So we can even say that the universe was wise to give you this protection, and you were also changed and maybe transformed. If you become conscious of this, it could have the potential to give you wisdom and experience. So yeah, this was something that came to you from the outside. All right, if you chose number 3, let's see. This one is extravíos, which means being lost. Now, this one has to do with the sword, so it is something mental, and it has level 3 intensity. So again, we're working around the notion of creation. This basically means that you were able to think of something that had it didn't have that much of an intensity because it's number 3, but you were able to think about this, and excuse me, you were trying to be creative, but it actually led you to be lost. So this is very typical when you want to embark on a creative endeavor, like you want to maybe develop a new project, you're thinking about it, right? But the mind can also play tricks on you, and if you think so much about something, you become lost. Now, this could also mean that what you were doing or what you were trying to do um, basically led you to doubt yourself, right? Like overthinking, I can't do it, I don't seem to be able to have the resources, right, to do this activity, which is creative. And by not being able to go forward with it, you become lost, you become stuck. So it's not lost in the sense of, I don't know where I am, but lost in the sense of being stuck and not being able to move forward. This was in your control this past week. But yeah, it basically led you to feel and become lost because of this mental idea that you had going on in your mind, right? Okay, so I'm going to read the last 3 for this upcoming week at the end of the video. Now let's go into the terms to be defined. First, I'm going to be defining philosophical terms, and then I'll go with the psychological terms. Okay, so as for consciousness, let's start with consciousness. So consciousness, what I have seen so far about consciousness is that there's this idea in Hermeticism which basically talks about everything being mental. Now, what is cognition? What is mentality? What are thoughts? And what is consciousness? I think those are oftentimes used as synonyms of one another, right? Especially when we say, like, you need to think, or you need to use your mind, or you need to become conscious or aware of things. I think consciousness is a sort of mechanism. Now, I'm not really sure it exists, but if I were to be put on the spotlight and ask what consciousness is, a lot of times I define things with its opposite or with analogies. So I can say consciousness is kind of like a machine being on, right? Like, let's say you have your laptop, and it's off, right? But then you want to use it, so you turn it on, and that's kind of like humans, right? Like, consciousness is that capacity to think and perceive the world, and many times it's off. I think for most people it's off, but when you want to pay attention to something, you need to turn it on, right? And that's consciousness. Consciousness is ultimately, first and foremost, a recipient of information that you need to activate, right? Turn on, and then it allows you to be able to evaluate, right? Like, okay, this is beneficial for me, this is harmful for me, right? And then that allows you to execute and carry out actions. So consciousness is this like three-dimensional mechanism, right, where it takes information in, it evaluates it, thinks about it, and then it is able to put it out there too. Okay, now let's go to freedom. Freedom is an idea that, uh, you know, well, I have seen this, like, I think the most common example is like in history with like the United States with slaves, right? And then like monarchies and suppressing rebellions, and the rebellions most of the time talk about freedom, right? Like we want our freedom. But for me, freedom is basically, well, you can define it also very generally as being able to do what you want to do. Now, of course, it kind of comes in conflict with other people's freedoms, right? Because you can't just go around like stealing or, killing. So I think freedom is, I'm not really sure. I think it's an idea that it's a feeling. I think freedom is a feeling. It's a feeling that you get maybe, like just imagine yourself traveling, right? And you're on the road and the air is hitting your face and you just feel free, right? Because you can be somewhere and be free but not feel free, right? So I think freedom is ultimately not really, I mean, it is something physical because if you're in prison you're not free, but yeah, you are free to do whatever you want while you're in prison, right? So you could be in prison and feel free, right? Like if you but I know a lot of people won't agree with that. But if you're like, reading a book and then your mind is just out there, so you could be free in mind or in body, right? And it is ultimately a feeling, I think. All right, now let's go with justice. Justice, what I have seen is being able to make a wrong right through alternative means, right? So it's like an eye for an eye. No, I guess justice in its old version is that, right? Like you steal from me, now I steal from you, right? But not in our modern day, that wouldn't really make a lot of sense. It's like you steal from me, and now you have to pay me a fine. You have to indemnize me, right? I'm not sure if that's the word. You have to retribute or give back to me in a different way what you took from me, right? Um, so justice is also a feeling. I'm going to start defining these things as a feeling. Um, but I think it's something that people feel is fair to them. Now, that feeling of fairness and justice, I'm not really sure where it comes from. I think it may come from the fact that if someone, for example, hits you, you get angry and you want to hit back and have that sense of justice, right? If someone pushes you, you want to push them back, like it's basically like you're coming into my area and you attack me, you do something to me, right? But there are other more complex ideas related to justice, right? Like maybe let's talk about the salary gap that they often talk about, right? Between men and women, and how men make more than women, right? And women feel that's unfair, that's unjust, right? So where's my justice? Where's my equality, right? But I think in essence, it is a feeling of being like at the same level as others in regards to a situation, right? Or in regards to something. Okay, now let's go into morality. So morality, and after this is ethics. Morality is the study between making the right decisions and making the wrong decisions. What is right and what is wrong, right? Now it's different from ethics. Excuse me. And let me just bring ethics into here because when I was in the university, I took a course on ethics, professional ethics, and ethics is like the umbrella, and moral, there are different morals, like moral codes, like criminals have a moral code, right? But ethics is the study of all those different types of morals. Morality is the idea or the feeling that um, what people are doing has to be in accordance to a pre-written implicit or explicit uh, criteria, right, or criterion. So this means that you must always act in accordance to the rules of that community or that organization, right? Whether it's like a prison community or a church community, right? Like there are certain things that you're not supposed to do and you are supposed to do. And I think it becomes even muddier when those rules are not explicit, right? Because there are explicit rules, such as, like, when you're in this community, you're not going to steal. Um, but there are more implicit rules, right? Like, such as when people ask for help, you need to provide that help. And if you don't provide that help, you're going to be frowned upon, right? It's going to look bad. Or like in prison, for instance, where it's like the rule or the law of the strongest and the fittest. If someone disrespects you, the moral code in prison demands from you an answer, right? And more often than not, an aggressive answer, right? And if you don't do that, then people are going to think you're a punk, people are going to think you're weak, and they're going to start taking advantage of you, right? So there are consequences, and they vary in degree of intensity, but there are consequences when moral rules are not followed, right? Now it's your responsibility to figure out what those implicit moral codes are, right? Like just by observing people and watching them interact. But you could make mistakes, right? And by not knowing, if you're new to a community, you could make mistakes as to how to proceed with the moral codes, right? Ethics is the study of all of those situations, right? But there's also a notion in ethics where people will say that's not ethical. And I think this is more done in professional settings, right? Where, for example, if you get like business people doing a shady deal, right? Or taking advantage of intel or inside trading or inside information, right? Those type of situations are not ethical, right? It's like maybe you're working at a restaurant and there's food that's not accounted for, right? So you steal the food and you say, well, nobody is gonna find out anyway, and nobody does find out, right? Nobody knows that you stole food or that you have been stealing food, but it's not ethical, right? And that may even go back to the feeling of justice, right? You're doing something that's unjust, right? You're stealing from the company. You're not paying for the food, right? And you can make up all sorts of excuses like, well, they underpay me, my family's starving, right? Like, sure. And then we can weigh those in to the justice idea. Um, but, in a sense, things that are unethical because they're hidden, right? Because you need to hide, you need to run away in order not to be caught. You need to lie, right? And that's anti-communication, right? Because communication is just saying, hey, I need more money, or hey, my family's starving, can I take some of this food that's extra, that's not going in the inventory or whatever, and kind of like negotiating that. Now if you're in a position where maybe you say, I've done that, I've asked nicely, I'm like I've tried communicating, but now I use unethical tactics because the people that I have been trying to communicate with aren't communicating with me. Now you can weigh that in, and maybe the scales of balance do shift a little bit more in your favor or not. I don't know. But yeah, because then we could talk about like, what is ethical in those type of situations. If you have a boss that's rich and they're taking advantage of the company or the employees, then is it ethical to steal, right? Yeah, you could say, well, to a certain extent, yes, but then if you get caught, you're probably going to get fired. So you're running a risk, right? Okay, let's go with reality. So, reality, I have been influenced a lot in relation to this notion of reality with Kant. Now, Kant talks about phenomena and noumenon, and phenomena is basically what we perceive right, as something that is. So we say, the table is a table because I perceive it with my senses. I can touch it, I can see it. If I slide it, I can hear it. But the noumenon is the thing in itself, right? And this means that we will never be able to know what that thing is without human perception. Now, reality, what do I think about reality? So that just to finish up that idea of what I have learned, basically says that we will never really know what reality is. We only experience parts of reality, right? Thanks to our senses, but we'll never really know what it is. Um, and what I think reality is like, well, first of all, I think it's where we live, right? It's, you could say it's like the universe, it's life, it's time, it's space. Um, but I can't help but also bring in this idea of what real is, right? Like that's real. Like if you do something, and I think it's kind of tied into truth. Like if you speak truth, if you speak the real, right? If you're real and you're true to yourself, if you don't lie and you don't hide, right? Then you're contributing to reality, I guess. Excuse me. But reality does have to do with what is real, so we also have to consider the physical world, right? Like if you jump off a building, you're gonna die, or a cliff. So it's basically like the tangible world that we see out there. Now we can talk about like realities and what's real for me is not real for you, whatever, based on culture. But then we would enter the realm of what's moral, right, or what's immoral. Okay, truth. Oh man, I have a problem with truth, because I think people, I just posted a photo saying the ultimate intention, which means the ultimate goal of life, is complexity, and there are many people, especially like modern day or even old philosophers, intellectuals, and thinkers, that say that the ultimate goal of life is truth, that God is the ultimate truth, that's what you're trying to do, you're trying to get to truth, right? I disagree with that. I think it's very cliche to talk about truth, because if we go back to the noumenon idea, we will never really know what truth is. I think truth is relative, right? I think this is an idea that I also got from somewhere, which basically says truth can be reinterpreted in many different ways. And it's not truth that wins, it's the best arguments using truth that win, right? But that can be manipulated. It depends on how agile and how eloquent and how witty and how good you are at like using words to manipulate and to change the perspectives on situations, because you can be presented with a situation and like a baby or a kid, you're not going to know what that situation means. Someone has to explain it to you, right? Because you're going to say, what is this situation about, right? Or I kind of understand what that means. You're like a student of life, but you need a teacher to come in there and say, well, this happened because of this, and this means this, and this is this, and this is that, right? And you need someone to define exactly what that is. And when a person is doing that, such as me talking, for example, it doesn't mean you're right. It just means that you're convincing the person, right? And then you get consensus, like the scientific community, where everybody's just like, yes, it's data, it's evidence, it's empirical, and that's truth. But it's like, no, it's not. You don't even know what truth is. You're just agreeing on something and calling it truth, right? So for me, truth is relative. It's all about interpretation and how good you are at explaining and re-explaining and reframing things in different ways so that you convince and influence and persuade people. And the more people you persuade, the more truth you will have behind that idea or whatever. But it's like, like so many examples in history have happened with this idea where everybody thinks something is true, like when they used to think that the earth was the center of the solar system or of the universe, and then Copernicus comes around, and says, no, it's not earth, it's actually the sun. Everybody's like, no, that's not true, the truth is this. And then the truth changes. So we can just notice that with the changes in the ideas in regards to truth, right? What's true in one century or in one time in history is false in another one, and then something else becomes true, right? So truth changes. You see what I'm saying? So you can't say that it's the ultimate goal, because it's constantly being shifted around by different interpretations or different evidence or whatever. Okay, the next one is virtue. Virtue, I think, is like again, a lot of times, a lot of people talk about virtue, like especially I think the Romans, or the ancient philosophers used to say that you need to achieve virtue, which is basically, like, I think it combines discipline and excellence or expertise, right? Obviously, knowledge of those skills. So it's like, if you're, I don't know, abstaining yourself or not having any sex, or I don't know, you're not going to eat meat, or you're not going to use social media, or you're not going to pollute, or you're going to recycle, right? Where you try to do these things that apparently are good for the environment, for society, for yourself, and you stick to it, right? Like, for example, doing exercise for a couple months is a virtue, because you're able to be consistent in that. It's not doing something one time, it's doing it over and over again, and having that be something that is ultimately good for everybody, right, including yourself. That's virtue. Virtue is sticking to your guns, right? And like, basically doing what you say you want to do, right? Like exercising. Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit faster because I feel like I'm taking a long time with these. The next one is beauty. Now, beauty, first of all, is kind of like truth. It's relative, and it's gonna depend on the time in which you're living in. Um, and there's also, they talk about objective truth, but objective beauty. But objective beauty is the same as objective truth. It's just consensus among many people that agree that something is beautiful. Now, where does that come from, right? Because we know that even species have these type of different signals, right? Like, I think peacocks, or I forget the animal that opens its feathers, right? And they're colorful in order to attract people, or attract a mate. And all species do this, right? They use beauty to attract, right? And beauty is correlated with attraction, because what you find attraction attracts you, right? And that gets you to be with a person, right? There needs to be beauty in the other person for you to approach that person, right? Or that other entity. Now, we could talk about inner beauty, outer beauty, right? There are different types of beauty, but beauty is ultimately a virtue, because it's being able to be beautiful, or to be attractive, or to be, especially when we talk about inner beauty, which is like, what is inner beauty? It's like being a good person, right? Having good thoughts, doing good things, right? Having good intentions. That's ultimately what beauty is. Um, okay, let's go with existence. So, existence, Sartre said something that went along the lines of, I think one of his quotes is like, existence precedes essence, which basically talks about reality, right? Like, you're able to think before you are. Therefore, you could be whatever you want to be, right? You're free. So, existence, I think, is related with reality. And it could also be this idea that uh, existence is something that happens to, like, living things, right? So we could say, now it would be really hard to define what a living thing is, because we can go as far as saying a table is also a living thing. It's existing. Therefore, all matter has existence, right? Like humans, animals, plants, but also objects, they have existence, right? Which could be, which I believe it is, right? You talk to something, and it receives that good vibe if you talk to it good. You talk bad to something, and it receives that bad vibe too. Um, But yeah, we can say that existence is that which everything that is matter has, right? Now, knowledge, they say knowledge is different from information because information is just like the data, the ideas, the content. But knowledge, I think knowledge is pre doing or potential to be applied, right? So it's like you have knowledge. Well, and we can separate it from information in terms of not knowing what to do with it. If you have knowledge and you don't know what to do with it, then you don't have knowledge, you have information. If you have knowledge, it's because you're able to use it for something. Now, let's say you have information on how to multiply, right? So but see, you don't know. You just have the information. It's like sitting there on your bookshelf, all dusty, and you have the information, but you don't have it as knowledge. Because if you get presented with a multiplication problem, 2 times 2, you're not going to be able to figure it out because you don't have that knowledge. You just have the information there, but it's not being you can't apply it, right? Knowledge is when you're able to apply it. So you think, okay, there's a problem, 2 times 2, what is 2 times 2? And then you're able to say 2 times 2 is 4 because you have the mathematical principles of multiplication, and that's knowledge because you're able to apply it. So knowledge is being able to have information that is applicable to situations or to problems or to life, right? Wisdom wisdom they say wisdom is like the correlation between experience and basic, well, experience is based on the past, and like I think there is an element of prediction, but there's also this other element of like, you're wise because you just say things that make sense even though maybe they're not applicable to any situation, right? But um I guess wisdom ultimately is like, a lot of times we can say is based on experience, but not necessarily. You can probably know what to do in a situation intuitively. Now you can say, well, intuition works with experience anyway, and I would say sure, but what about like just instinct, right? What if there are people that haven't experienced things that are relational to what they're experiencing in the moment, but are still able to know what to do? And it's not just being able to know what to do, because there's a phrase that says an intelligent person wins a war and a wise person avoids the war, or is able to avoid war. So it's not, being able to know what to do, like as in winning the war, but rather like looking at the broad panorama and being able to know what you need to do that will ultimately affect as far reaching out into the timeline that we have, into the past, into the present, into the future. So it's not just like I'm going to win this war, but now I have to fight another war and another war, and I can keep winning wars because I'm smart, but I'm losing soldiers, I'm losing resources, I'm not taking on other priorities because I'm just caught up in war when I should be doing other things, right? So it's like taking into consideration as much time as you can, right? Into the future, into the past. And the more time, I think, the wiser you are. Like if you're able to predict what, a certain decision or a certain situation is going to lead to far into the future, into different situations and with different people, that makes you wise, right? So I think that's kind of what it is. Intelligence. Intelligence, I think, is, well, they say it's the IQ. Like you take an IQ test and you're able to be very intelligent. Um, I just got this idea. Let me see if it works. Wisdom is horizontal in terms of timeline, and intelligence is vertical in terms of space, we can say. So you're able to see things. Now, are you able to apply things? well, you can apply them too, but do you have the will? Do you have the courage? Right? That's where kind of like wisdom comes in. It's kind of like a little emotional, because you can be intelligent and see many different things, right? Be able to solve many different problems, like the IQ test. I've taken a couple IQ tests, and free online, and they're usually like, notice this pattern, notice this pattern, notice this pattern, and now what's the next pattern, right? Or what is the pattern if it's 8, 10, 12, and then what are the next three numbers, right? And it gets more complex. So it's able to see things, but an intelligent person is not necessarily good or wise, or is even able to use their intelligence, right? Because I think like autistic people are very intelligent, but yet they're very like, socially isolated, right? I guess that has to do with different things. Okay, now good, we can say good may be related with the ultimate intention, because it is something that you need to get to. But I think it's also the idea of doing things that are in benefit. I've always kind of used the word benefit for good. I don't know where I saw it, but it's like doing things that are beneficial, first of all, to you, and second of all, to like other people and the world, right? So if you're good, now people nowadays, I think, confuse this notion and basically want you to sacrifice yourself for other people. If you don't sacrifice yourself, or if you don't put other people first, you're not good. You're bad, you're selfish. But I think that's wrong. I think you have to put yourself first. And that's one of the ultimate expressions of being good, right? If you're good to yourself. And then now, being good despite harming other people, I think that's where it gets tricky, right? Because you need to strike a balance. It would be an ideal world if we lived in a world where you would be able to be good to yourself and also be good to other people doing the same actions, right? That would be the ultimate good, which could be what good ultimately is. Because if you're sacrificing yourself for other people's good, then that's not good for you. But if you're also, being good to yourself and harming other people, that's also not good. So you need to elevate both of you and other people, and everybody benefit, right? That would be good. Evil, evil, I think, is, well, first and foremost, it's the intention, deliberately, consciously, of harming other people. Because we can say, well, people that don't know, right? People that were never taught, right from wrong, or people that don't know that are causing harm, we can basically take them out of the equation of evil, because it's not deliberate, it's not intentional. Even though they are causing harm, they are part of that group of evil, but they're a different type of evil because they don't know. Now, people that know, like let's say businessmen, right? You have all that knowledge, all that expertise, and you're consciously, deliberately scheming to rob people of their money. That's evil. You're harming people, right? Intentionally. Now we can get into this idea of good, and like I was with good, um, where we could say, well, what if you benefit and you harm other people? Is that evil? Because you're benefiting yourself, you're doing good to yourself. It's like, yes, but not really morally. And if you don't feel guilt, then you weren't taught guilt, or you weren't, or you just, you're just kind of like a weird person. Because how are you not going to feel guilty when you're consciously doing harm to other people? Now, if you do harm to yourself, even though you're benefiting other people, then I think that's just being like a sadomasochist, right? Where you like to harm yourself, and that is also evil. But people don't really care about that, because they're like, well, if you're harming yourself, then whatever, like we don't care about you. But we should care about people that harm themselves, that are evil to themselves, right? Ultimate evil, I guess, could be expressed as both harming yourself and harming other people, not caring about yourself and not caring about other people. But then you can think about that and say, well, if a person doesn't care about themselves, they're probably not doing a very good job at being evil to other people, because being evil also takes work, right? And a person that's evil to themselves is probably not going to do that much harm to other people. So I think maybe the ultimate evil is a person that is benefiting, right, from all that evil and is consciously doing harm to other people, right? Okay, balance. Balance, right now, I've come to think of balance as this idea of mixing good and evil, right? Good and evil intent. And this basically means that you're able to live with both. I mean, it may seem paradoxical, but you're able to fit in both ideas into your mind, right? Into your life, into the way that you're living. Um, so it's complexity ultimately. Balance is complexity, and complexity is balance between these two like extremes, and that's completely subjective and personal because it depends on you what that is, right? But we all have this intent for evil and for good, right? And sometimes we need to be good, sometimes we need to be evil, sometimes we need to think about ourselves only despite other people, sometimes we need to think about other people despite ourselves, sometimes we need to sacrifice ourselves for other people, sometimes we need to sacrifice other people for ourselves because situations are complex, right? But I think it's not about, it's easy to just think about one way of being and saying, okay, this is the way I'm going to be throughout my whole life because this traumatic experience happened, and it makes things easier. No, it's like a constant, uh, game, juggle act between the different types of being, right? Between the different types of good and the different types of evil that you can be, and kind of like taking all of that into perspective and balancing it out, and it's complex. It's going to make you think because you're going to say, how did I act this way last week, but now next week I'm going to be acting differently. I'm not true to myself. And it's like, it's not about being true because identity is defined by other people, right? Like I mentioned in this other video, excuse me. So it doesn't matter what people think about you because they only think one way about you. But you're multidimensional. You're complex. So you're gonna have to act different ways in different situations, and evaluate everything, right? Evaluate other people. Evaluate yourself. So that's balance. Reason. How is reason, for instance, different from consciousness? I think reason is, reason, for example, gets basically pit up against intuition, where they say reason is like the ability to think uh, like very well about something using as much evidence, as much facts, as much data, as much information as you can. But it's also the ability, the mental ability to be able to take all of that information into consideration and actually really use it. So it's not just about saying, oh, I have all this information, right? Like I have all these books on my bookshelf, but they're just, getting dusty and you're not using them, right? It's the same thing with reason. It's not only having all of that information, it's the process which happens before you get to knowledge, right? It's like the student in class that is listening to the teacher and is reasoning, it's associating, right? Like I've thought of myself as being like an associationist, where you associate, right? I've talked about this before, connect the dots. So someone says something, and it's not just isolated, it's not just out there like, oh yeah, that's cool, thanks for telling me. No, like you say, oh really, well, that's tied into this notion that I have on these ideas, and that also relates to this other idea. And right, like that's reasoning. Reasoning is when you're able to connect different things, you're able to read between the lines, connect the dots, right? And that needs to develop. It's just like we're I think we're born with a certain level of that, but we need to develop it further so we're able to take in more information, right? As time goes by, as we learn, and as we become more seasoned and experienced. Soul. Okay, so soul, they talk about soul as being, and this is, after this is spirit. Now, I've always had a problem with soul, with the word soul and spirit, kind of like with truth, Because I'm like, well, like right now with Hermeticism, I'm learning that I guess spirit. I don't know if I'm confusing these two, but spirit is something like that part of yourself that is part of the whole, right? So it's like God or the creator or the universe or whatever or the energy is like all spirit, right? And when you're born, like a part of that is in you, right? So it's kind of like, I was thinking about this and it's kind of crazy. Like humans were able to function, like machines without being connected, right? Like a TV. You want to turn on a TV, you need to connect it to the electricity cord, right? Humans aren't humans aren't needed to be connected to anything because we just function like that, right? Obviously, because of biochemical reactions in our stomach, and that's why we eat. But it's kind of crazy how we just function like that. Now they say soul is like that part of you that lives in you, that is alive, and when you die, your soul exits your body. But for me, it's very hard to wrap my head around those ideas, because if you were to take me back to like pre-thinking times or ancient times, and you were to ask me like, do humans have some type of like entity inside them that is making them you know like function? I don't know if I would say yes. Now I know spirit is also related to a religious semantic, right? A religious meaning where spirit is like, what goes back to God, but it's kind of like the same idea as in soul. So I don't know. I would probably like to dive deeper into the notions of soul and spirit. Okay, fate. Fate is, well, first of all, fate is destiny. So it's like what is already written in a sense. Um, but then we get into a complex idea, which is, or question, which is destiny, does destiny exist? So that question asks, is there already a pre-written, right, future? So an inevitable future that you're going to live forcibly, no matter what you do. Then that would go up against the notion of free will, which basically says that you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and you decide the fate of your own life, right? Now, then, if you're deciding the fate of your future, is it fate or are those just your decisions, right? So, fate is a complex idea, destiny, because we like to think about destiny and fate in positive terms, right? Like, my destiny is to be rich, to be a star, to do good in the world. But then when people do bad or their life goes sideways or backwards, or they end up in negative spots in life, then they don't talk about destiny, right? They may talk about it, but like as an inevitable destiny, like I was destined to be cursed in my life, right? um, but I think at the end of the day, it's a way to take responsibility from ourselves, right? Now, how much of it is really in our control and even in other people's control, and how much of it is just fate, right? Like being born, like why are you born and not another person that hasn't been born? So there could be a truth to fate, but just how much, I'm not sure. Transcendence. So transcendence, I think, like immediately has something to do with being able to go beyond the current moment, right? Like something is transcendent when it goes, like for example, you say, okay, I thought about this, or I'm gonna solve this by doing this or that, and then you do that, but it becomes such an effective way of doing it that it transcends that moment, and people in the future are going to use it, right? I don't know, like let's talk about maybe technology, television, radio. Like I just spoke about Pac-Man in this other video, how Pac-Man was, I guess, developed in the 80s, and then it transcended time because there are people that still like and play Pac-Man in the 2020s, right? So transcendence is ultimately being able to go beyond your current time and area or space. Determinism. Now, determinism, I think, is the foundation of scientific knowledge, which is basically it's dogmatic. People like it, but people don't like it. They have a weird relationship with determinism because there will be people that will come out and say, these are the facts. But then there will be people that will say, well, why can't the facts be questioned? So determinism becomes kind of like a thing, as in truth. It's the idea that everything can be defined and reduced. I like to use the term reductionist because I think it kind of gives you a better picture of what you're doing. You're reducing something maybe complex or more general into a simple idea, right? Like gravity, and that's it. So I think determinism is ultimately bad, but it could be good because, like in physics, it does help us to define certain things. Free will. Oh, like I was talking about free will, right? How it comes into conflict with fate. So free will is the idea that you're able to do whatever you want whenever you want, right? If you want to jump, jump. If you want to go to sleep, go to sleep. If you want to eat, eat, right? So it's this idea. Now, is it true? I would say based on not even being able to know what reality is, right? According to Kant, maybe it doesn't really exist. Maybe we're even like in like this idea that from Hermeticism, where they say that everything is mental, right? So we're the creation of a thinking entity, right? And just like you imagine a universe with characters, like Frank Lucas with Star Wars, and then you can make those characters do whatever you want them to do. So it's like we're being controlled like that. We're characters in the mind of this person that's just thinking us up and is basically controlling us, but we think we're free, right? So it's like you make a story with characters, right? It's pretty crazy. And in that story you have the people think that they have this thing called free will, right? Which is the opposite of what is real, which is you controlling them, right? Pretty crazy. Essence. Okay, I think I'm going to get in trouble here because I'm going to contradict myself with existence. Essence, because I said existence is what everything is made of, or what lives inside of everything, right? In the material world. But in this case, essence, no, I don't think I'm going to contradict myself because according to what Sartre says, he says existence precedes essence. Now, essence, you may think essence is first, is the fundamental building block of your existence, of your life, but it's actually what other people think you are. I would even say it has a correlation with your personality, your essence. So people see you for who you really are, quote unquote, who you really are, right? Limited to their senses. And then they say, oh, yeah, that's your essence. Your essence is to teach, your essence is to help, is to be of service, right? But again, that's after your existence, because first, in order for you to have an essence, or for other people to perceive you have an essence, first of all, you need to have existence. You need to exist, right? And then you can have an essence to say, this is who I am in my core, in my being, right? Substance. And these last ones, oh man, this is going to get complicated because substance and form. Substance, well, no, it's kind of easy because you can think of it like this. Water. You pour water in a cup, right? So you have the substance, which is water, and then thanks to the cup, it takes on a form, right? So this is a very philosophical idea, and it gets played around a lot in philosophy. It gets played with a lot in philosophy, but it's basically like you have, it's kind of like existence and essence. And let me know if I'm wrong here because I never like studied philosophy in university, but it's basically the idea that you have existence, you have substance, right? You're matter, you matter, and then you're able to define yourself, right? Your essence, and that's your form, right? What form, what shape are you gonna take in relation to the world, right? What's your cup like? Your water, but what's your cup like, right? That's kind of like the analogy. Okay, I think I'm gonna make another video for the psychological um, terms, because in this one, this video is gonna be very long, and I don't think I'm gonna have enough space on my phone to save it. So let's just get into the second reading of the tarot for this next week, right? And I think next week I'll do another reading and I'll define the psychological terms. All right. So again, pick a number 1 to 3. This is for this upcoming week, right? What is something that's going to happen in this upcoming week to you and what it means. Okay, so you got it, 1, 2, or 3. This is number 1, fortune and dignity. So it's the wheel of fortune. It's a major arcana. So this major arcana means that that's going to happen is not in your control at all. This is something either circumstantial or because of other people that are out there making this happen over you, but it's a good thing. It's something that is going to come in the way of like flowing, kind of like a rolling, because it does have the wheel, right? And it's kind of like when you spin the wheel of fortune and you get like a good thing, right? Like I just spin a wheel yesterday and I won 200 pesos, but I wasn't able to spend them, so that was kind of tricky. But in this case, this fortune that you're gonna get is tied in with dignity, which means that maybe there's also going to be something that's going to make you feel good, feel worthy, maybe even to receive more of it in the future. So it's not something that, I mean, you may receive the preconditions to receive more in the future, right? And in this case, the wheel of fortune is blind. So it does mean that it's something that maybe you can't see yet, or when it happens, you may not be able to see it. But it's kind of like the notion of justice is blind, right? Where you are chosen just randomly, right? It's not, and this is kind of hard to do, but it does happen. It's hard for this to happen because most of the time when something is beneficial, there's a lot of attention paid to it, right? Like if someone's gonna receive money, people are like, let's make sure it's the people that are the right people receive this, right? But in this case, it is something that is fortunate, but it's kind of like random and you're chosen, right? Okay, so if you pick number 2, here we go. Change, and it's backwards, the cup. You're going to be and it's one, like I mentioned, is either unity or it's the lowest rank, right? But according to this, I see an emotional change coming this upcoming week for you. Well, first of all, I see change for you. And this change could be, well, it is emotional. Now, it is backwards, so there may be some defiance. There may be some type of conflict here. You may, they say change is always good, and this is not the case. Change could be bad. It could be good too. And in terms of emotional, I mean, if you don't really like to feel emotional, then this is not going to be a good week for you, because you are going to be feeling this change on emotional terms. Now, if you're a person that says, oh, I like the adrenaline, I like to feel emotion, then this is good for you, especially if you're one that likes to feel and that likes to change, which I don't think that goes hand in hand. People that feel typically aren't people that like change, right? They like comfort. But this could be something that it's not necessarily good or bad. I guess this is just going to depend on how you are and the type of person that you are. Basically, if you like to feel the change. Oh, and it's also number 1, which is a beginning. So this is the beginning of something. It could be in terms of a relationship also, which is very common to think about when we talk about emotional, right? You don't really feel emotion when you're at work. Well, you do, but in different terms. But it could be the beginning of a romantic relationship. It could be the beginning of maybe like a passion for something, right? Or it could be the beginning of like being single after a breakup, right? Because that's also emotional, or having to leave something that you love behind, right? Okay, and let's go with the last one, number 3. It's Blonde Woman, right? And this is a minor arcane. Now, it's number 13, so this is a combination between unity and creativity, which is 1 and 3. It's intense. This is intense. And the woman ultimately is a symbol for chaos, which is the potential in creativity. Now, I would dare say this is very good. This is something that will ultimately lead you to great emotions, great feelings. You're going to be feeling awesome basically because it's an emotional dimension. It's very intense. And since it has 3 of creativity, you're going to be wanting to focus specifically on your creative intentions and your creative projects, right? Because this is a very good week for you in terms of like your emotions and everything that come with it. Now, why is it blonde? Blonde is the symbol of gold, right? Of basically wealth, of earnings, of success. So, but it does have a chaotic element to it, which is also a creative element. So you are going to want to focus on those things in particular because, and it's completely up to you. But if you do focus on that this week, um, it could potentially bring wealth, right? Bring prosperity. If not so much on physical and monetary financial terms, it will be on emotional terms, right? Great feelings of like, I don't know, even pride, excellence, right? Discipline, all of these like good emotions that come with being creative and being a person that is unified ultimately because it has the one, right? So you're unified. It has that. See, the thing about the numbers is like the first set of numbers is like one level. The second set of numbers, right, like the 10, 11, 12 is a second level. So this is a next level thing, and it's a new beginning. It's unity, and you're being creative. So it's a very good card. Well, that's all I got for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, I'll be reading 3 more cards for the past and 3 more for the future. And I'll be finishing up with the terms to define, but the psychological ones, all right? So I'll see you guys next video. All right, peace.